So, welcome to a very short dissident pod. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry is, of course, giving their 2 cents in relation to the Epstein files, as could I, and partly as will I. But before heading on to Epstein and the current uh, debacle and horrendous revelations, news to some and old news to most of us who have been aware of Epstein for almost a decade now, I would like to take you back to 1973. Then there was a psychiatrist named Rosenhan. Now, this fellow had a very respected position within psychiatry, but still he was very skeptical about the reliability of psychiatric labels, believing that they reflected perception more than a reality. Now, 8 healthy people, the experiment was this, I'll summarize it real quickly. 8 healthy people pretended to hear voices to get admitted to psychiatric hospitals. Once inside, they acted normally and said that they were fine. However, all of them were diagnosed with serious mental disorders like schizophrenia and kept for weeks. Staff interpreted their normal behavior, note taking, politeness, attentiveness, assertiveness, as symptoms of an illness, while the actual patients were often suspecting that they were sane. So, when the hospitals later challenged Rosenhan to send pseudo patients, once again, the staff of these hospitals identified 41 faked pseudo patients. However, Rosenhan had sent none. So, conclusion from this experiment: psychiatric diagnoses were heavily influenced by context and expectations, not just the objective facts. Labels stuck even when evidence contradicted them, showing that once someone is labeled insane, their reality is often ignored. The study forced reforms in diagnosis and exposed the dangers of institutional overconfidence. Now, uh, what does this have to do with Epstein? Well, what I've been thinking is that the Rosenhan experiment reveals quite um, quite clearly how powerful labels and systemic contexts can override what we lawyers like to call objective evidence, leading professionals to misinterpret reality through a preconceived lens. This provides a compelling framework, in my view, for understanding why Epstein's evidence has been ignored or dismissed for years, dare I say decades. Now, once a narrative is set, contradictory evidence becomes invisible or at least reinterpreted. Rosenhan's study: once a person was labeled schizophrenic, even normal behavior was seen as a symptom. Similarly, once powerful individuals were framed in media or social circles as upstanding or connected, uh, you know, the Princess of Norway is one example, evidence against them is psychologically filtered out. Accusations dismissed as conspiracy theories. Lawsuits as extortion attempts, victims were unreliable, not because the evidence was absent, but because it clashed with the dominant narrative of who these people were. If one of the girls that came forward a few years ago saying that Epstein had done this, his friends, Prince Andrew, had done that, they were ignored. because who would believe an upstanding citizen like Andrew Mountbatten? Now, secondly, there's also the problem of institutional self-preservation and a kind of confirmation bias surrounding this strata of the social hierarchy. The psychiatric hospitals in Rosenhan's study were invested in their own authority and diagnostic certainty. In Epstein's case, multiple systems, legal, political, media, financial, had incentives to avoid scandal. Prosecutors and law enforcement avoided pursuing powerful networks. Media outlets initially treated the story as salacious but not systemic. Elite social and professional circles protected their own, like the hospital staff who reinterpreted note taking as pathology. Institutions, legal mainly, reinterpreted clear evidence as unsubstantiated claims, or for the media, tabloid material, all to avoid disrupting the circles of power. There's also the what you can call insane place. There's an effect when the environment itself kind of distorts judgment. Rosenhan showed that inside an asylum, normality looks very out of place. In Epstein's world, a milieu of extreme wealth, private islands, secretive dealings, drugs, and God knows what. I think God would prefer not to know, actually. What might seem glaringly criminal to outsiders was quite normal behavior internally within these circles. People that environment, people in the environment at the time likely thought, oh, well, this is how we, the elite, live. Um, oh, those things that people are saying, they're just vile rumors from jealous outsiders. They don't understand us. So, just as real patients inside the mental asylum saw the pseudo patients as being sane, ordinary people outside the Epstein circle saw red flags long before the insiders did, and long before the law enforcement and the media were willing to grapple with these abnormities. So, this is the illusion of institutional infallibility. The hospitals that challenged Rosenhan were so sure of its accuracy that it found imposters that later didn't even exist. Similarly, authorities, the FBI, the prosecutors, intelligence agencies, what have you not, may have believed they were handling Epstein appropriately through non-prosecution agreements or limited charges or a small reveal, because they trusted the system's own process, which obviously did nothing to bring down these power structures. So this overconfidence in institutional judgment allowed evidence to languish for years, uninvestigated. I would say rigorously uninvestigated, if that's even a possibility. And finally, of course, you have the stigma and silencing of unbelievable truths, the truths that we dissidents have been screaming about for many, many years. Now, Rosenhan's pseudo patients could not get out because staff did dismiss their claims of sanity. Epstein's victims were often disbelieved, shamed, or legally silenced because speaking out challenged powerful interests. The evidence was there, but the credibility of the victim was systematically undermined, much like how the pseudo patient's requests for a discharge were seen as manipulative. Now, there's a very important conclusion here: perception over reality. Rosenhan's lesson is that the context of perception can override facts. And this explains the Epstein case very starkly. When power, money, and social status shapes perception, evidence alone is insufficient. It takes a catastrophic rupture in the narrative, and that is renewed media focus, a whistleblower, a public outrage, or as now the Epstein files being flooded. This will force a re-evaluation, but not before. The Epstein evidence was ignored not because it was hidden, but because those in a position to act were psychologically and systematically orientated to explain it away and give all possible reasons for why not look into it. But it was done out of interpretation and a perception that overrided the available facts. So basically, the final line is sometimes the most dangerous illusion belongs to those who believe they cannot be wrong. Those in power believe that their own judgment was the one that should be the dominant judgment. And that was Epstein was manageable, accusations were exaggerated, that the system was working, and that illusion allowed Epstein's criminality to persist in plain sight. Just an idea, but I think the theory is applicable. Thank you for your time.